Good morning, good evening, wherever you, noble viewer, might be. This is Commander Culture, your perspicacious purveyor of Samizdat, and I am joined by Templar, my ever noble co-host. And we are coming back to you. We missed a week last week, and for that we apologize humbly, but we thank you for staying with us and continuing on this journey. Today, we're going to be starting a longer discussion, something that Templar and I have been talking a lot about offline, and that's kind of looking at where we are headed. A lot of people say that Western civilization is over, it's done. A lot of people say that the West will sort of rise again out of the ashes by returning to all of the noble deeds and feats of the past. And then other people, especially religious people, will say, no, this is the end times. God's coming. The Antichrist is on his way. The vaccines are the sign of the beast. Get yourself ready for heaven. And we look at that Venn diagram, Templar and I, and we find ourselves sitting right in the middle. We are both deeply committed Christian men. We believe that Western civilization is under intense assault and may even be crumbling as we speak. And we also believe that there is a better world, a better possibility for us and our children and our posterity. And so we wanted to start examining that sort of a new West, not a rebuilding of a crumbled, bombed out city, but an entirely new edifice, something that builds on all of the strengths of the old, but consciously sort of pairs out the weaknesses. And so that's something that, like I said, that we've been working on the last couple of weeks of looking at and talking over and conceptualizing. We wanted to bring to you our thoughts on that, see what you had to say about it, the noble viewer, and sort of expand on it. So the title here, towards Novus Occidentalis, it's hopefully not too pretentious of a title, 7 Steps to a New West. And Templar was kind enough to illuminate those steps: resilience, community, acceleration, chaos, renaissance. This is the world that we are currently living in. This is the world that we're inhabiting. And this is the hopes. This is what we can see at the end of the tunnel. And this is what we can hope is coming. And consolidation, expansion, these are things to be talked about at a later time, if indeed they're even possible. But I wanted to mention to you guys, all of the listeners, this is a broad concept, and it spans this sort of XY axis that I have here. And I wish I could bring you the XY axis. I tried really hard to come up with the proper graphic right before the stream, and I was not able to. But you've got the personal, yourself, the individual on one hand, and you go all the way across the axis to the political, where masses of individuals are having an effect on the society around them, and vice versa. And then you look at the vertical axis, the chronological on the one hand, everything from the past to the present to the future, to the teleological, where you're looking at things from a conceptual cause and effect framework outside of time and maybe even space. And as long as you're able to observe those 4 dimensions, the personal to the political, the chronological, and the teleological, you will have a grasp on where you need to be and what you need to do and why any of this is even important. And indeed, it is important. Templar, I've been talking a while.
Yeah, no, that was good.
Welcome.
It was a good intro. Yeah, thank you for having me as usual. And I'm really excited about really starting this series. I think is what it'll be. You had mentioned that we'll spend some time discussing these things, and each step here kind of deserves its own stream, its own attention, because they are important. And I think what this does for us is it provides not necessarily a goal, because everyone's goals might look different, but really just a roadmap. And so we talk often, and we in previous streams especially, trying to communicate how bad things are, or at least convey the reality of the situation. If you give someone a red pill, depending on how they interpret it, they might consider it a white pill or a black pill. If you say, hey, we're $30 trillion in debt as a country. So might go, oh, so we're screwed and I should, be very concerned. Or, oh, this entity that is blowing all this money is probably going to collapse at some point. We could capitalize on that. So there's, depending on how the individual interprets these facts, it could have an effect on really how positive they are and how motivated they are to shape reality in the way they want to see it. So I feel like we've spent a decent amount of time providing some of these facts, kind of painting the picture of the world that we live in, and now we have this roadmap. The so what factor. What are we going to do about it? What can we work on to achieve our goals, whatever those goals may be? And so these steps should help us kind of establish the roadmap and a path and guide us down this path to what a reality that we would like to see as opposed to one that we currently live in. And they're not necessarily, it's not like you have to completely complete and consolidate step one before moving on to step two. A lot of them are sort of blended together to some degree, and you can action multiple at multiple points in time. And so it really gives you a cause for action. And with that, a lot of people can do a lot more than what they're doing right now, which is potentially just throwing their hands in the air in despair and saying, you know what, we can't win. There's nothing we could do. I'll just continue to run on my hamster wheel until I die, and then that'll be my legacy. And then you would also mention, in the title, The New West. And that was something that we kind of threw back and forth between each other outside of these streams. Was, what are we trying to do? What's this title going to be? And it's difficult because you don't want to necessarily fall victim to worshiping the ashes of those who came before you. And I know that term's passed around a lot, and that's usually a critique of traditionalism. You're worshiping ashes, and the response is always, no, we're preserving the fire. So we need to be cognizant of that. If you say something like, I want to, fight for France, like my goal is to basically recreate France at its peak. I want to make France a Catholic country, all these things. I would just caution you with, that seems more along the lines of worshiping the ashes. You are trying to bring back something that has effectively died at this point. Similar to America, if you're going to try to rebuild America in the current landscape, I don't know how realistic that is. You would have to move or get rid of a lot of people in order to establish America's original borders, establish America's original founding ideology, and then move forward with the reality you want to see. And so there's some degree of cutting your losses and consolidating around the areas that you can influence, because what you don't want to do is, as much as we mourn the loss of something like Notre Dame, the loss of Notre Dame and our inability to rebuild it in its original form is a symptom of a disease. And, it's kind of like you have an infected limb. The solution may just be to cut it off. If your limb is trapped in a trap, in order to survive, you might just have to cut it off and move on. So we're not here to just recreate, the Roman Empire, or recreate the Pantheon or the Holy Roman Empire, or traditional America. We're here to look ahead at what we can do today and take steps in the direction that we want our reality to be. But we can't forget the past at the same time. And then the final question really is, how long is this going to take? It's like, all right, we're going to gear up for a grand journey. We're gonna go on this crusade through these steps, and then emerge on the other side victorious. What does that timeline look like? Are we talking 2 years? 4 years, like the Crusades, maybe 100 years? And insofar as you can even predict these kinds of things, which you really can't. Who knows? Tomorrow there might be a completely power altering event, but I really expect this to span the course. It's more of a reconquista as opposed to a revolution. It's not something that we'll fight and win in the time span of 4 to 8 years. It's more something along the lines of, we will push our agenda and make these efforts, and then we will raise our kids to continue the fight the same way that the Spanish did against the Muslim invaders of their country, and a fight that spanned, almost 1,000 years, at least 500. And so it's a multi-generational fight, and that you could really argue has been going on since the concept of good and evil came with Christ. And obviously, the enemies of Christ are numerous, and they'll never be completely eliminated until the second coming. But I don't think that this is something that we can even win in a temporal way in the next couple of years. This is something that you need to wrap your head around. That is a struggle that transcends just countries and borders or political parties. It's a fight on a spiritual level that's manifesting itself in the temporal world, and that is something that we will fight our entire lives, and then our children will fight for their entire lives, and then their children as well. So we just need to wrap our head around this concept, these steps that we're talking about here. This is something that can continue very far into the future, and does not necessarily come with a quick battle, decisive victory, and subsequent triumphs. This will be, as we can expect throughout history, this will be a long and arduous with task with much suffering. So with that, let's get into what we can do with all of this in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to sort of piggyback on some of that too. It's like, well, how do I word it? It's like, how do you do this? How do you affect a reconquista? At the most, a defense of your own house at the least, while retaining your soul. I mean, we've seen already that our adversaries have gone so far to the left, that where they want to help all people and open the borders and feed the world and all of these utopian slogans, that they've lost their souls completely. And in fighting against that, how do we retain our salvation, our souls? It's a question that really troubles me, or keeps me awake at night, because of this dimension between the personal and the political. Things that I advocate on a political level are things that I would never advocate on a personal level. And how do you reconcile those two sort of poles as you go into this sort of environment? And this is kind of these 5 steps that we've highlighted here that we're going to start talking about are indeed an environment rather than sort of a chronological journey, right? Just like Templar said a few minutes ago. And the way that I conceptualize it, Templar, is, I was looking at this while I was working with this data, and I thought resilience, community, acceleration, chaos, and renaissance. It reminds me visually of a roller coaster. A roller coaster that you've always wanted to ride, and you arrive at the theme park and you can see that not everything is right. It looks maybe like it's on fire. There's some tracks that don't quite end properly over there. You see people limping away from it, but you also see people, saying that was a great ride. The resilience aspect is just in your mind saying, yeah, I'm going to do this roller coaster no matter what. I'm going to jump on the journey of life, the animating contest of liberty. And so you get in line. Well, who do you get in line with? Well, this is your community. Are these people that are going to talk you out of riding this roller coaster? Are they people who are going to talk you into riding this roller coaster to pump you up? Are they people that are going to demoralize you or remoralize you? And then you get on the roller coaster and it really starts moving along. And so you could be at any point in this journey. You could just sort of be looking at it and say, well, I've just noticed that stuff's going on, what we call in the business just getting red pilled, right? Or maybe you've just started building a community, or maybe you realize, hey, we're really heading towards something quick. And if you, depending on where you are, my screen just went black. That's how much it likes me. You might be thinking, okay, we're into the chaos. Well, no matter what, that track does in fact end. You can follow that roller coaster track, and boom, the car goes off the end because it's been destroyed, it's been sabotaged, it's been attacked, it's on fire. That civilizational roller coaster, and that's going to cause chaos. Some people are going to die, some people are going to go crazy, some people are going to turn into saboteurs, other people are going to turn into engineers and try to rebuild it. And that's where then the Renaissance aspect comes in. And we're definitely not at the Renaissance, but we could be anywhere between step 1 and 2, depending on who you are and where you come into this particular event.
Yeah, and also where you are geographically, because this entire process could occur start to finish somewhere in the world, say like the United States or something, simultaneously. A country like Japan still just chilling, never experiences any of these steps, and or their population has no need to pursue any of these steps. So, depending on where you're at, it could be even, states or even cities or counties within the United States going through each one of these steps, while on the other side of the country, absolutely nothing is happening.
Yeah,
so
that's a very
state dependent.
That's a very good point. It's definitely geographically dependent, and that's why one of my big, points to anybody that's asking is, it's like, check where you are first. If you're somewhere that's gonna go crazy or that's gonna go kinetic, get out of there. The classic example that I always use is, if you're in World War II Poland, or if you're in Poland in 1939, buy a ticket to Brazil, and you're going to have a really fun next 6 years. If you don't, you're going to have one of the most miserable 6 years that any human beings have ever had in their life. So it's all about where you are. It's all about where you are.
On that one, very minute disagreement there, but I would just say, like, hey, if Poland's your home, and even if you knew what was coming, maybe your duty at that point, you're just going to decide to stick around, knowing that there's a solid chance that you're not going to see the end of it. And that as well, I would say, is the mentality you need to have approaching this as well. Both on like a time basis. The Reconquistas, or even the Crusaders. Those are wars spanning hundreds of years. Even if they never died in a battle, they never actually lived to see the end of those wars or the victory. So they don't know. They're really fighting for future generations, and at complete expense to themselves. Simultaneously, there's a good chance that they might die in the process, and which would functionally provide the same outcome. You don't know if you win or not because you're dead. And so you need to embrace this struggle with the knowledge that you might not see it through, and still embrace the struggle anyway.
I can definitely agree with those sentiments. I would also point out, though, if we're going to use the Poland example, that some of the most useful anti-communist fighters during the whole Cold War were Poles who escaped in 1939 and formed the core of an army that returned to the continent on D-Day, that defended Great Britain in the Battle of Britain, and then fought communism in Africa and Europe and Asia and South America and other places for the next 50 years. So it all depends on you, yourself, your temperament, your what you're willing and able to lose, and
what your skills and what you have to offer.
Exactly. So none of this is a one size fits all thing. What we're doing here is conceptualizing. We're not writing a manifesto. We might do that someday, but this is not that. This is something to help organize. To what would they call it in the military, where you orient yourself to
priorities of
position.
Work. It would probably be this. So there's two elements. Probably there'd be the OODA loop. You observe, orient, decide, and then act. So we've done our observation of our situation. We're orienting ourselves on the future here. We're making a decision based off of our observations and orientations, and then it's up to you, the individual, to take action at that point. And then again, that's within. So what does your action look like? You establish your priorities of work, which is in our case the steps here. And your number one priority, step one being resilience. We'll get into that. But it provides you not just a roadmap, but also, okay, this is the end state that I want to achieve. What's my first step? The hardest part of writing a paper is just getting, the first sentence down. And the hardest part of getting fit is simply getting off the couch and just going to the gym. So I think this is our encouragement to you to take action here.
The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
There you go.
all right, let's move down here. We have resilience as step number one, and resilience comprises a whole bunch of different, or is comprised, I should say, of a whole bunch of different sub elements, things that you can look at, things where you may have strengths, where you may have weaknesses, where you want to, in order to become a fully rounded, prepared, useful individual, you need to check each and every one of these sort of elements. Not that you have to be like, Chuck Norris, the millionaire, who can travel through time, and is like Odysseus or something, but whatever your individual strengths are, whatever your individual positions are. Anyway, this is all going to be self-explanatory, because what we're going to do is we're going to walk through each one of these 7 individual pieces of resilience.
Mm-hmm. And I would also say that the utility in this is not just saying like, oh, I'm a good fighter. It's also saying, oh crap, my finances are garbage, or I have no clue what my history is, or maybe I'm good at shooting guns, but I couldn't run a mile to save my life. Identifying the gaps, your weaknesses, is just as important as sharpening your strengths, if not more important, really. And the idea behind resilience is really resilience against what? And I would say it's your ability to endure suffering, or really respond to hardship, I guess. So some people are so fragile that something as simple as a single medical bill or a car accident could take them out financially. Maybe they don't have any savings, or some people are so unfit that if they did have to run a mile, they just have a heart attack. Or some people just have no clue what they were to ever do if they were ever to get in a physical altercation, and it would just be a pathetic mess. And so identify those weaknesses that you have, and then hopefully we provide some of the tools that you need in order to work on to be proficient in these areas. And again, what this allow you to do is endure hardship. You will just be more useful in general, and you will just be not necessarily a bigger threat to your enemy, but just a harder target for your enemy to overcome. And it's a very holistic approach to ensuring that it's not just for preventing the enemy from overcoming you, but also you being able to impose your will on the enemy. If you're secure in these areas, there's a lot less that the enemy can leverage against you, and you'll just be better off overall. It's pretty self-explanatory, but I'm really trying to emphasize the utility of looking at each of these elements and then hardening them. But we'll get into what that looks like here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah. Let's move along. Where am I here? There we go.
Yeah. Step one there, self-sufficiency, or the first element, I guess, of resilience, self-sufficiency and self-defense. Because if you're self-sufficient, you have all these resources, that's great. Anyone could just come along and take them from you if you have no capacity for self-defense. So it's really the combination of those two things that makes you a resilient individual against anyone who seeks to deprive you of your goods or your life, liberty, or property. The combination of self-sufficiency and self-defense insulates you from those efforts. And as it saw before, it's the equivalent of a parallel economy, just on an individual level. And there's plenty of steps that you could take on an individual level to start working towards this.
Yeah, I want to say too, this a lot of this seems like common sense, and people listening might go, oh yeah, well, I kind of already do this, or oh well, that seems like something that pretty much everybody does. But here's the thing: over the last year and a half or 2 years, we have seen many, if not most, people in our lives, surrounding us at work, at church, in the family, whatever, collapse in one way or another. They have surrendered their individual liberty, or they have surrendered to fear, or they have given into the whims of the people who would control them, right? They lack certain of these elements that we're going over. And so it's, even though it seems like, it's like, they say common sense isn't so common. Well, that's what we're facing here. There are very few relative to the larger number of people, purebloods, or people who understand this, or people who haven't gotten the clot shot, whatever. And using these sorts of things, you can steel yourself to those sorts of pressures that are going to come from the outside. No, like, if you have an aunt or something who took the jab or whatever, so like no one walked up to her and said, "Hey, take this or else," but she gave in anyway. Well, why? She wasn't prepared. She didn't have a mindset of self-sufficiency. She didn't have a mindset of liberty. She didn't have a mindset of, I'm not going to judge other people's spirituality, but if you fear something other than God, and if you fear death at all, then your priorities are not properly straight, and I'm not talking about that in like a samurai, kamikaze sort of way, but I also sort of am. Yes, so the law makes the comment. One of our viewers says that the list that's missing here is spirituality, and yes, that's not an unconscious thing that we're leaving out. That's something that we're going to address as we go through this. But most certainly, without a spiritual center, you don't. All you have to rely on is self-sufficiency, which is not in itself sufficient. So that's kind of how that goes. You need to have a mindset of being prepared. So, like Templar was saying in that last slide, assess your weaknesses. Right? Don't sit there and gloat on your own strengths. As fun as that would be, where am I lacking? Like, how can I improve? Not just for myself, but for the needs of this sort of survival self-defense mentality. Mm-hmm.
And a good thought exercise to apply is you just go down the list there and you say, like, okay, fidelity, we'll elaborate on that, but do I know where I came from? What are my values? Where's my history? That kind of the spiritual element that the law is talking about. And you could say, Nietzsche's quote on a man with a why can bear any how. But you just go down the next one, fighter. Okay, so if I got in a fight, how, either with weapons or just unarmed combat, how effective would I be? And you just go down the list. And if I had to, hike with a pack on right now, how far would I get? How fast could I do it? If I lost my job right now, you just get down to the finance. If I lost my job right now, how screwed would I be? Would I be able to recover from that? And so you could just go down the list and apply, just do a thought exercise, apply what levers of influence that the enemy can impose on you in each of those. And then you'll probably quickly find out, like, oh crap, if the electricity's shut off, and my fridge can't keep my food preserved, I'm basically down to 3 days of food. So at that point, you are useful for 3 days after someone shuts the electricity off. And after that, you're basically ready to capitulate. And someone who can hold out in a fight for 3 days is not useful to anyone. No war has lasted 3 days. So that's the kind of mentality that you have when approaching these elements of resiliency.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you want to. I had something really good in mind when I was talking about the constructive versus the reductive, but it's not so much like, what can I sort of take away from myself and still be able to, make it on my own, but rather how can I build up a position where I will be able to be resilient in the face of whatever sort of thing comes at me. So you mentioned, like, food. There was a statistic I was seeing, it was on the internet, so who knows, but it's like the average American person only has like 5 days worth of food in their possession, right? So if your ability to go to the grocery store is knocked out of the ring for some reason, are you going to starve to death? Like, you need to kind of get prepared for that. because that's something that where we're at. I'm gonna, maybe my own dear sainted mother is listening to this, but one of the things that she always said from the time I was a little kid is there will be a time in the future when no one's allowed to buy and no one's allowed to sell, and she meant that as Christians, Christians will not be allowed to buy and sell, and I always just thought she was being hysterical. But it turns out that's actually biblical, and
ahead of her time.
It turns out, that here we are in an environment where people are literally being told that they, because they are, individual or independent thinkers, or because they are Christians, they're not allowed to buy and sell. Wow, who knew? My mom was a prophet. Anything else we'd like to say on this first one, self-sufficiency?
No, I think if you haven't internalized the necessity of this mindset yet, you better hop on that train, because the time to realize that you are not prepared is not when everything's going to crap. Yeah, so
right.
definitely there's a saying that we have in the tactical combat casualty care world. And there's 2 times when you can learn how to treat a casualty: before you have a casualty and after you have a casualty. And I'll just leave it at that, because I think everyone would rather be in the before time. Everything's fine until it's not. So start prepping for the not while it is.
And I'll highlight one more time before we move on, the law, Mr. Law's comment that spirituality, and I would say in specific Christianity, as giving the greatest part of resiliency, because you have it gives you an absolute center core, and it also gives you a hope. Right. And not a hope in like a hopey dopey, gee, Obama's our president now, everything's going to be great kind of way, but a hope in that no matter what happens, no matter how bad everything gets, you will always be saved. Right. It's like, you're. So I'll leave it at that, because we're going to address that as we move through this, these ideas of ours.
And on the spirituality thing as well, I don't think that, we might convert some people, but I haven't. My name is Templar. I haven't really been concealed about my spiritual roots. Like I'm Catholic, and so that's my why. That's my motivation there. I think this has an element of a unite the right aspect to it, where that middle of the circle there is left blank, because as much as I would like everyone to be Catholic, I know that's kind of a pipe dream, and we can't be very choosy with who our allies are at this point. So you kind of have to walk it back and pitch a little bigger of a tent. And it's really a matter of who could I, after we defeat our enemies, who could I have a discussion with instead of having to fight? If I'm going to have to fight them, then I'll fight them. But if I can resolve my differences, maybe with a Protestant or with a pagan or something like that, where there's more potential similarities than differences, but I can resolve those differences through conversation as opposed to having to kill each other, then we could stop there, So everyone has personal motivations on why they might want to pursue these steps and break away from what we all agree to be somewhat of an evil powers that be right now. I'm not going to prescribe that why for you. Everyone watching this is going to have their own why. But
the globalist American empire, is that what we're trying to break away from?
Yeah, that's a something that we all dislike, and we all dislike it for different reasons. Maybe you're a white person, you don't like the way that white people are being treated under that. Maybe you're a Catholic and you don't like the way that Catholics are being treated. Maybe any number. Maybe you're a libertarian and you just love freedom, and obviously this is not an environment that's conducive for freedom. So any of these elements you can get behind, and it's not in our interest to be infighting between those very, not that they are important, but they're not important enough to sacrifice everything for. And we can overcome our enemies who want to see us dead, and then we can hash out our differences between us. But
like civilized people.
yes. Once we establish civilization, then we can have discussions like civilized people. Until then, all of these different groups can kind of come together and form that community element and start helping each other work on the resilience element and kind of overcome this common enemy. So that the spiritual element is it's a necessary part, but it's almost more so on the individual to determine their why and then use that as their motivation for following these steps through from 1 to 5 and beyond.
All right. Fidelity is your next step. It looks like we have a new Cherie, Miss Cherie Chrétien has joined the chat. Hello, Cherie. Welcome to you.
Hello. Sorry I'm late.
Oh, no, that's okay. We're very happy to have you. We've just been discussing the beginnings here, sort of jumping into it. You can see down the banner on the bottom is sort of the topics that we'll be going over. And we're talking about fidelity now. And this is my interpretation as sort of we've discussed together, Templar. But it's, and I think the way that you put it is know who your heroes are, know where we came from, know why we are who we are, and where we found ourselves in history. And I sort of broke that down to know where you came from. And that doesn't mean like, oh, I came across the Mayflower, because a lot of people listening are not Mayflowerites, right? You might be Australian, you might be British, you might be from Poland. We have a lot of listeners from Poland. And so it's like, where did you come from? Your family, your grandfather, your great-grandfather, where are your people from? Who you came from, where you came from, not necessarily geographically, but it could be socioeconomically or politically. Know why they came there, know what they found when they went looking to create a family of which you're an extended part. Know who they looked up to, who were their heroes as you look up to them as heroes. Know who, conversely, they despised, right? The ancients, there's a lot to be said for ancient wisdom. And we all know that IQs have been dropping, and it would be conceited to think that your humble hosts here are immune to that sort of thing. I don't think I could pass one of the college exams that I've seen, like for Harvard in 1902. But I think I could out-debate just about any Harvard graduate that they throw at me nowadays. So who did the ancients despise? Who did they fear? Right. And this comes to the unexamined life is not worth living. Right. Examine who you are and why you believe that. Who are you going to be? Who are you going to have fidelity to? Right. Yeah. If not the people who gave you the life that you have.
I think we underestimate the utility of an origin story. And I'm not talking about Marvel movies. I'm talking about, the Romans citing things like the Aeneid, as their origin story, or the Greeks citing the Iliad. And these are things that are so relevant that, Napoleon, when he's rolling through Greece, references how, you destroyed my people at Troy so many years ago, and now I've returned. And it's like, why is this relevant? Still 2000. Why is it being cited thousands of years later from such an old text? And these origin stories can motivate people to accomplish so many amazing things. And then with the Romans again as well, it's like their story still relevant to this day and propelled them, for 1,000 years throughout the span of their empire. So it shouldn't be understated, the utility of these things. And it's extremely valuable for people. And it's something that we are absolutely lacking in this day and age. We have somewhat of an American origin story. It's being manipulated. It's being somewhat twisted to be a globalist origin story, but we should definitely control the narrative on where we came from and establish, all of these things that are listed on this fidelity slide, because they matter. And if somebody can come in and change these things for you, it could potentially change your entire perspective, your entire motivation. And so it's worth it to define that for yourself and for your children and preserve that, and then tell this story to the people around you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think we talked about in another stream that, or maybe it was just I was offline, but where human beings are literacy is only a couple thousand years old, and universal literacy is really only a couple hundred years old. And so, where people derive meaning in their lives is from stories that they hear, that they're able to sort of plug in like puzzle pieces that can, of amorphous shape into their lives to give their lives meaning. And that's exactly what the left, what the communists are trying to sunder from our people, from the people of the West. I mean, sometimes it's as blatant and ridiculous. I mean, I remember in the '90s, when they were saying, oh, America's, always been a multiracial country and this and that, and it's like, no, it really hasn't. It's been a country that has played host to different races in different times in different capacities, but it's not really a multiracial country. And I said, well, at least they can't say this kind of ridiculous asinine stupidity about countries like Great Britain or countries like Sweden. And lo and behold, now 20, 30 years later, they're saying the same things. Oh, Britain, look at the Romans. They were black, when they came into here. The first Swedes were actually, Africans with dark skin, and we can prove that because we just made it up out of our head. And what they're trying to do with stuff, even this ridiculous. Who was it? The much reviled Joseph Goebbels, I think, who said, if you tell the bigger the lie that you tell, the more likely people will be to believe it. And so if they tell you didn't come from somewhere, or, the people who really were here were black, or were, or that your ancestors were rapacious, thieves, and this and that, you might actually start believing it because your brain is primed to believe stories that are told, whether fantastic or otherwise, right? This is why stuff like, Marvel movies sell a lot more tickets than documentaries, because they appeal to that particular part of the human brain that can absorb that lesson. And so don't let other people define that narrative for you. Define it for yourself and then spread it outwards as you need to, because that's the only way that you got it, was by somebody else propagating that to you in the correct fashion, going back and back and back and back in the generations. And are you going to be the first schmuck who drops the ball, right? The person who says, oh, I'm not really going to, tell the pilgrim story to the kids because actually turkeys came from Mexico. And not Massachusetts, and so it's really important that the children know things that are accurate. And I want to tell them that Squanto actually died of the smallpox like 5 years later. So really, it's not worth talking about. And just stupid stuff like that. You control the story. You control the narrative with an iron fist. Okay, because if you don't control the history, if you don't control the story of you and your people, they will absolutely step into that vacuum and they will take it from you. And make sure that, and it has to be, again, so you mentioned the Aeneid, you mentioned the Iliad. These are timeless, very well constructed epic stories. And so if you're, and the founding of the United States is a timeless epic story. And so if you're going to make sure that this is an ironclad story that's meant to build people up, you have to understand it from the personal to the political, from the chronological to the teleological, because otherwise they're going to come in and they're going to sow seeds of doubt. This is what Satan does, right? This is what the servants of Satan do: is they'll sow doubt. They'll say, well, maybe it's not really. But we're not all pilgrims. I mean, some of them. I mean, my family came from France, so that means they weren't English. So I can't really partake. And it's like, get over yourself. Find a hero. Find a narrative that is traditional, that is supporting of Western civilization, and back it up. That was a rant. I apologize.
No, it's good. It's interesting. I mean, just the pictures you picked, I think, match what we're talking about perfectly. Because how can you not be inspired by that? How can you not want to strive for that. You might not be or look like a Greek god, ready to vanquish thousands of Eastern barbarians, but
Well, speak for yourself, but
yeah.
no, but this is why they try to destroy.
You strive for that. You look up at the statues, who are those things, and then you tell your kids like that's what greatness looks like, and then there's no need for fiction, because anything that has been magnificent, I guarantee you, there's a person who's actually done it. Like, you want to be inspired, look up Heraclius, in the at the end of the Byzantine Empire, he single-handedly kept Rome alive. And then you look at the men at the siege of Vienna, and you look at the Spartans at Thermopylae. And it doesn't. You don't have to be. It's not about the historical facts necessarily. Like, these things actually happen, which is cool. But the takeaway is the story, is the virtues that these people had, the strength that these people had, that you can appeal to in your own struggle and derive inspiration from that.
Right, and they don't even have to be actually historical. That's why I added here Superman and Supergirl. That's like, these are people, and by the way, I'll shill for it. If in the new Spider-Man movie, which is a really great movie, surprised the hell out of me. In these sort of movies, it's about somebody who is struggling and does something beyond themselves. Now, they might have superpowers, they might not, or it's the same sort of thing, whether it's a historical figure or fictional person. It's somebody from which you can learn how to model yourself, right? And they want to take all of that away. That's why they tear down these statues. That's why they destroy Superman. That's and these characters that are meant to teach us how to be better people. Right. If I can look at, I'm trying to think of American heroes. Well, I'll give you an example, like Robert E. Lee. Sure, Robert E. Lee, Andrew Jackson. Right. These are guys who they were actual, legitimate, real American heroes. Right. Maybe they can be judged by modern standards to have made mistakes or to have held antiquated opinions. But the fact is that looking at the totality of their life, right, you can say this is a heroic person. This is somebody whose mentality or traits or determination or resiliency I want to emulate. And so they tear that statue down so that you can never point to that for your son and say that was a great man. You see, and it's it's bad. Shall we?
Yeah,
move on
let's
to the
keep
next?
going.
Okay, Sherry, any thoughts on this?
I was just thinking of that meme where it's an African, I guess, telling a Greek or something that they're Roman or another Roman, and like, this is a bad omen.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Oh, okay, sorry.
You may have to share it out. This is why we need a Telegram, and you can run it. Fighters. So there's a lot here, and I'll start out talking about it. But I know that Templar has a lot of experience on this end of things. Being a fighter is something that men are called to, men, and it's in our blood. Whether you're running around in the jungles as a Marine Corps hoorah kind of person, or whether you're sitting at home in your chair sipping a Slurpee, but slicing people up on World of Warcraft, right? You want to be out there fighting, right? You feel a need to protect. You feel a need to project your power. And so this is kind of a thing that comes naturally. And this is something that they're trying to strip away. We've talked in previous videos about them trying to destroy masculinity and toxic, calling it toxic and things like that. In order to be resilient, you have to be a fighter. You have to be willing to defend what it is that you have staked out, and you have to be willing to project into enemy territory the consequences of the enemy disrupting your zone, right? So it's not something that can be taken away, and it is something that's always there on the table. And that's why, people say, well, what can I do? Da, 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 da. I think one of the very best things that anybody can possibly do is to get punched in the face.
Yeah.
It's because
No, it's true.
there's no better way to for a man. I'm telling you, clarity mixed with pain, mixed with it all comes together, and you learn not only what it means to be hit in the face, you also understand what it means to hit somebody in the face. Right? There's so much education that comes from that one punch, that getting into a boxing ring, or into a martial arts dojo or something like that can teach you about yourself, about your limits, about the limitations around you, about the kind of community that you need to be in. And that, well, I'll leave it there for right now.
I'll summarize this point as I would rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And as we know, it only takes one belligerent for you to be in a war. You could spend your whole life being a pacifist, but as soon as someone wants to punch you in the face, guess what? Now you're in a fight. So long as there are people who are willing to fight you, you need to have the capacity for violence in return. Or you could just roll on your back and submit and hand over whatever they want. But we're not taking that route. We are, as we alluded to with the Time for Choosing stream, we have decided to not be victims, and prepare ourselves for that, train essentially for that capacity for violence. And you got that sick tactical dude rocking the M107 50 cal there. He's all Arctic warfare, looks like a scene from Shooter. That's sweet. You don't need to get to that guy's point. All right. You don't need to spend $5,000 on a 50 cal rifle. What you can do is you could spend $500 on a Smith & Wesson NMP 1522, which is it's a 22 rifle with it's similar to the AR platform, and the rounds are 9 cents a piece. The cost prohibitive element of getting into the firearms industry isn't really an excuse, because we're talking, if you just didn't go out to eat for a month, or if you took the money that you probably spend on Fortnite skins or something and you put that towards a single rifle and 500 rounds of 22, you are now infinitely better off than you were before you had those things. So there's a lot of little things and then you could train with that as well. You don't have to shoot 5.56 rounds, 50 cents a round, go through 20 rounds. There's $10 right there. Yeah, not everyone can do that. Nobody wants to. But what you can do is shoot for 10 cents a round with a 22 and get the same fundamentals down. And then even beyond that, you could do dry firing, with your own weapons. Like, oh, I can't make it to the range. That's fine. There's always something you could be doing to hone your skills. And then there's always the saying as well, amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics. And so, you can LARP around in the woods and everything. Say you've got all that down well. It's like, okay, but how long can you do that for? Can you hike 12 miles? Can you really subject yourself to it's the equivalent of getting punched in the face, but for military applications. You can get punched in the face if you get your feet wet in the woods and you're still going to be out there for 3 more days. That's a punch in the face that you have also probably not been familiar with, or getting poison ivy or something. And all of these things are stuff that you don't want to learn while you're in the middle of it. You don't want to try to reinvent the wheel while you're trying to use the wheel simultaneously. You can get all the answers to the test prior to being the test. And again, this is just one area, and I could talk about this it could be its own stream. But I'm trying to get out of this tunnel vision of, buy an AR-15. You should do that. You should buy an AR-15. You should buy, armor plates. You should buy a belt and become familiar with your equipment, be able to employ it. But there's other things associated with that. If you have a map and a compass, but you don't know how to use it, they are of no use to you. So buying these things, getting your hands on this gear, things that make you a better fighter are not good if you don't have the capacity to employ them, whether that's the knowledge base or just the simple fitness, because another thing you could think of is it's a lot easier for me to train somebody to learn how to shoot than it is for me to train somebody to get into shape. One of those takes 6 months to a year. The other one takes a couple weeks. Not even that. Really just like 1 week. And so you should set yourself up for success. And if you're put in a position where you have to fight, where do you want most of your proficiency? It's cool if you could rattle off some cool tactics about maneuver warfare or some book that you read or something. Yes, you should still read books and be familiar with, Sun Tzu's The Art of War, but you definitely need to have a more comprehensive fighter aspect in order to be resilient if you find yourself in a fight, whether that's kinetic with firearms or getting punched in the face. You should take a holistic approach to this and prepare yourself, because if there's any one of these resiliency items, I would say the fighter element is probably the least likely that you'll need to use it, but it is probably the most important when you need to use it, if that makes sense. So, prioritize. You can prioritize all of them. You probably won't find yourself in a fight anytime soon. You might, but you better hope that you've put some thought and effort into that one before you're in that fight, because that one could end up being the worst for you the fastest.
Well, that's why I like your the formulation that you had of rather being a gardener, or rather being a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And so it all comes down to, what I'm trying to think of, where you're purposeful about it. I remember, when I was a kid, when I gotten into scraps and things when I was a kid, and I thought, oh, okay, if I go into a boxing class, it'll be fine. I'll just do this and punch that and da 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 da. And the first time that you're in a sparring match, you realize just how much more you actually need to train. And one little event like that, it teaches you, okay, I need to learn all this much more stuff. And you want to go out and learn it because now you found all of your deficiencies, or many of them, right? And those can only be filled in by training. Like you said, whether that's training by figuring out how much endurance you have long term, taking a rucksack around a perimeter of your property, or whether that's getting in the boxing ring or something like that. And so the way I like to break it down, you had mentioned that armchair generals like to talk tactics, but real people know logistics, right? And I think it's important to conceptualize all of that stuff, and then put it into practice as much as you can. So study tactics, practice tactics in the boxing ring or wherever. Study operations and then perform operations. How much food do you have on stock? How easy is it for you to put your bug out bag together and get your family out the front door or the back door, right? So you can read about strategy, and then you can see, well, how are we going to affect change in a local area or in a community, or how are we going to organize ourselves defensively or otherwise? And this philosophy kind of permeates everything. And this is why I have Sun Tzu to William Lind, right? Where you go all the way back to the beginning of early Chinese literature, all the way up to the modern day. And this is what people are talking about. This is what men are talking about. This is how to protect your own and how to project outwards. And if you study those kind of things, if you learn those kind of things, if you practice those kind of things, maybe you've all seen the book. I don't know if I have it on my big shelf over there, but where it's like taking Sun Tzu's Art of War into the business world, or how to bring Sun Tzu's Art of War into the corporate boardroom and stuff. And it's true, but it's not just Sun Tzu. It's any of these lessons you can bring into any lesson that you have. So learning to be a fighter like Templar said, is probably the most important one when you need it. But understand that it will also help you with self-sufficiency. It'll help you with fidelity. You look up to your sensei. It'll help you with fitness, for heaven's sakes. It'll help you with family. It'll help you with, it'll even potentially help you with finance, and it'll definitely help you with your future. So it's key, and especially for the mental health of men. We need to be fighters, whether we're protecting, whether we're projecting, whether we're planning, or whether we're training. And that's something that they're trying to take away from us, that they're trying to take away from men of the West. And men of the West have always been fighters, whether it's Vikings or Roman legionaries or Celtic, Woad raiders or whatever it was. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking, if you're harmless, you're not virtuous. You're just harmless. If you become a monster, if you have a capacity for violence and you choose not to be monstrous, that is virtue. So
yeah, I'm going to go back. Look at this guy right here, Superman. Right, Superman could destroy the planet. Right, Achilles or whoever this is could destroy an entire army, but they chose not to. Right, they used their strengths in virtuous ways. Sorry to interrupt, but that's exactly right. Yeah.
And the prerequisite there is the capacity for violence. So if you are a man and you don't have the capacity for violence, you need to gain the capacity for violence, because I cannot imagine any time in history or any time in the future where that will not be necessary. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if you're defending yourself against an animal, other humans, just really any threat that would involve you to defend or even go on the offense. This will never not be relevant for any man in all of human history.
Mm-hmm. And it'll help you with the ladies too.
That's true.
Sherry, what do you think? do women like dangerous men?
Well, we know some women like bad boys, and that's not always good. But when it comes to, being, protected, you definitely want a man that can hold his own.
Mm-hmm. And that will have your back, right? Or is capable of extreme violence at a moment's notice on your behalf.
Yes. Be capable of violence. That's the takeaway. Be capable of violence.
Yeah.
We could discuss the whole stream, about how ways to go about doing that, but the point is that hopefully you come away with this with a thought of like, maybe this is an area that I'm weak in, and you're going to have to go find a dojo, find someone who is familiar with these things. I can promise you, if someone is as enthusiastic about it as I am, they will spend hours neglecting their real world responsibilities just to fill you in on all of this knowledge they have trapped up in their head that they need to share with people.
If anyone wants to talk guns, let us know, and we could open up a whole gun stream for Templar, because he would go morning, noon, and night. Okay, so let's move on to fitness, because it's linked with being a fighter. You can't be a fighter if you're not in tip-top shape. And again, we see this work here, resilience. I was kind of thinking, well, now what makes up fitness, right? And it's not just like having muscles. It's also a mindset. And so I came up with these four subgroups for fitness. Resiliency demonstrates fitness. Strength demonstrates fitness. Competence demonstrates fitness. And confidence demonstrates fitness.
Mm-hmm. And then I would say like all those things, and then over time, because anyone could like throw up bench press like one time, but how long can you do that for? Someone described to me the physical fitness tests that they take in the military. They said, I would take someone who scores a 90% on those physical fitness tests twice in a row instead of someone who can score 100% once. So there's an element of longevity to that as well. You're not just strong today, but you're strong for continued operations weeks, months into the future.
Right. And we've all seen those guys at the gym who are, they're bench pressing, 400 pounds or something. But they have they've got no game, or they've got no confidence, or they've got, severe personality problems that would erode resiliency. Maybe they're addicted to, performance enhancing drugs. Who knows? But strength alone is not going to get you all that far. You have to know what you're doing. Like you said, get 90%, 100% of the time. Confidence, say, it's like if you go into a run. Long time ago in my life, I ran long distances, not necessarily for fun, but because I had to. And it was like, it wasn't something that I wanted to do. It wasn't something I looked forward to doing, but I knew for a fact that no matter what, I was going to finish that 5K. I'm here now. In the future, sometime later, I will be 5 kilometers down the road. And I know that's going to happen, and I know I'm not going to pass out, and I know I'm not going to, and I know how my body is going to respond because I trained for it. And so there was a confidence there that lent itself psychological strength to my fitness regimen. I'll give you a fun story. I'll tell everybody. One time when I was training there, one of my trainers was a guy who I looked up to a lot. He was a former law enforcement officer, and he was actually dying of cancer or fighting cancer, I guess they say. And I was really struggling on some long distance run. I don't even know how long I was running that day, and I was chugging along trying to do my best. And he comes up to me, just bobbing his shoulders and looking all good. And he had run the same long distance. And he's like, "Hey, what's wrong with you?" And I'm like, it's just really tough this far into it. I'm not really feeling like talking. He's like, "Listen, I've got a 3-pound tumor that's moving faster than you. You can pick it up a little bit, don't you think?" And I just had to laugh at that, because that combines all these elements here: resiliency, confidence, competence. And anytime after that, I just thought, hey, that guy's 3-pound tumor that he had in his gut could run faster than me, if I'm starting to lag. And so a lot of it is mental. So much of fitness is mental. They talk about a runner's high, or they talk about, getting into the zone, or they talk about all these other things. And that is all psychosomatic. And that comes from repetition. It comes from practice. It comes from confidence in your own competency. I don't know. It's what you were saying. It's a lot easier to teach somebody to shoot well than it is to teach them to get into basic shape. Right. And can you talk a little bit about that more here in this context?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory, like people who prepare to hike Mount Everest, that's not something you could do overnight. And in various military boot camps, sometimes they take 2 weeks to train people to shoot. Sometimes they take just a couple days. Some people, it clicks faster more than others, but the kind of time that you need to invest in a human to make them proficient in weapons handling versus fitness it's pretty obvious how the difference between those. And so if you're wondering where you should prepare and you're anticipating needing to fight, I would prefer, if I was gonna lead a militia, I would rather have a bunch of fit dudes come to me empty-handed, and we'll find armaments for them, than a bunch of people with their rifles slung who are huffing and puffing just to get into formation, because that's a whole different ball game at that point, trying to get someone up to speed. And when you talk about this fitness, it's really cool what starts to happen when you make this a priority in your life, because it just magically translates, like you kind of alluded to other things, not just like confidence in terms of a command presence that you would have in a room full of people, but also if there is a task or a problem that you're presented with. Like, I had never ran a marathon, and I was never much of a runner. I prioritize other just really workouts over running. I used to still do cardio, but I was like, what? I've never done a marathon before. I think I should do a marathon. I didn't train for it. I was very busy the week leading up to it, and it was just something that I thought, what? I think I'm in better physical shape than the average person. Like, I don't think this is something that will be too difficult for me to accomplish. And me and a buddy just on a whim ran a marathon. And that's the kind of things that you could do when you make fitness a priority, is it's like, holy crap, these are things that people like train for, that people make their life goal. Like, I want to run a marathon. And then this is something that you could just get off the couch on a weekend and go do, because you've already put the time in. And I think with a lot of these things, There's the Aristotle quote about how excellence is a habit, and that's true. And the very, very convenient thing is that when you make this a habit, you could take a couple days off, and it's not gonna be a difference, and what you can build up in 20 years, and then perform in a moment, it's very rewarding, and it's kind of funny because with fit people, oftentimes like, oh, what's the secret? What do you do? And I've had people ask me that before, and I usually just tell them, oh, just good genes. I don't even work out. I just do things, and it's just magic like that. And it's for someone who is wondering what the secret is, they won't understand, because there is no secret. You're witnessing, 20 plus years of habitual fitness. And so that's something and you could start it whenever. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. Same goes for fitness. And again, the number of benefits that it translates to is numerous. It's really, it's a priority. It should be a priority for everyone. And it's something that you could just kind of keep on the back burner and just kind of keep doing while you're pursuing these other things. And it'll make you more proficient in all those other elements.
So true. It'll also make you more attractive with the ladies.
Yep. Which leads us right into our next one.
It does. See how we do that, guys? We're pros. I want to ask before we move on, Ms. Cherie, do you have any thoughts on fitness?
I know for me, I really enjoyed being in classes because I'm not, a competitive person, but
The women always do. The women love the classes. I think it's the community element.
No, it's like whenever I'm planking, I want to make sure I can outlast the person next to me. Like that's my competitiveness.
There you go. See, that can be it too. Community and competitiveness. Let me see what's going on here. There we go. Okay, here we are, family. Because if a woman thinks you can protect her and she likes the way you look, you are on track to start a family. And this is a key because the family is what projects you into the future, right?
That's funny that you mentioned that, because that was something that I didn't realize. When I had my kid, I was like, oh my gosh, like when I die, I really won't die, because like here is a physical manifestation of me. It's essentially an echo of your existence in the future. Maybe it's a narcissistic way of looking at it, but it's almost a biological fact where it's like, yes, this is a part of me that will continue in existence so long as my kids continue to have kids. My essence will live on as well. And it also made me think, oh, that means I am also an extension of those who have come before me. And it kind of blew me away in a way that I had never realized until I actually had a kid.
It's very humbling, It was something I was an avid reader of the Chateau Heartiste blog back when that was a going thing before it got nuked for being too real. And one of the things that they said is, like, if you are not having a kid, if you don't have a kid, you are the first person in a billion years of genetic evolution, or the first person in creation in your family line to not continue that family line. All that genetics, all of that learned memory, all of that biological perfection, if you will, is lost, right? So we've had a few people on here, some of our listeners. One fellow even called himself an anti-natalist, and that sort of troubled me for a while. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions, and I know people arrive at those opinions especially among our listenership, for rational reasons. But if we're going to outlast the enemy, this is something we talk about much later in this series. But if we're going to outlast the enemy, we have to show up for the future. Right? We know that the enemy is declining in population rapidly. And we also know that we have the ability to win simply by being there, simply by showing up to the fight, by having our kids and our grandkids and our progeny there. Now, Mr. Templar, when we were talking about family, you'd said family is the greatest strength and family is the greatest weakness. And we didn't really elaborate too much on that. And so when I was working on putting this together in StreamYard, I was like, our side, we usually don't talk about family being the greatest weakness, but the way that I looked at it, I'll talk about weakness first, but then I'll turn it over to you, is that, if, like in this bottom picture here, if we're protecting our children, if we're holding that umbrella, if we're embracing our spouse, if we can tend to lose focus. We can tend to lose perspective. And, we're so busy protecting what's on the inside that we forget that we're part of a larger effort. Or that just tactical situational awareness, people can sneak up on us and use our children against us, and we're seeing that even with this critical race theory crap in the crappy public schools. We see that with the vaccines. We see that with the transgenderism movement. There's nothing that would knock me out of the culture war faster, for all of you SJWs out there, than one of my kids turning transgender or announcing that they're gay or something. All of a sudden, all my attention would be focused on them and getting right whatever was wrong with them. And so in that way, I see it could be a weakness, right? But I want you to speak on both of these, Templar.
Yeah, I think the weakness piece, people might find moral strength there. Anyone who's a parent is willing to do, arguably, they're willing to do more for their kids than they would ever do for themselves. So there's an element of having a fire lit under your butt to really succeed in your responsibility and your obligations to the people who are depending on you. I think the weakness part that comes in is any strong-willed and strong-minded individual can endure an immense amount of suffering on their own. If you were to take the fight to the enemy, they take away, maybe you go days without eating, and you might even enjoy that. And it's raining, you're miserable, you haven't had any hot food or hot shower, in weeks or something like that. Like the dudes in the mountains of Afghanistan, I can only imagine the kind of conditions that they're living in. Those conditions are not conducive for raising a family, and you really can't drag a family through that kind of environment. And if it doesn't matter how motivated you are, as soon as you have kids, they're essentially dead weight to you in a lot of these areas, and you have to siphon off your own energy, your own resources to provide for them. But you also can't do anything to jeopardize your access to those resources, because if you're cut off, so are they. And a lot of times, you see it in the movies, people are, if they need information from someone that's like, oh, you'll never break me or whatever, and then they bring someone that they love and they threaten that person in order to get information out of the person that they're interrogating. And it's like, it doesn't matter how strong-willed you are, you can break me instantly. You could break me instantly by subjecting the people that I love to pain. Do whatever you want to me, but just don't touch my kids. And they know that. And so when you introduce a family into this world, it's a weakness in the sense that it is a vulnerability that can be leveraged against you. And I really think that's why they've had so much success with these vaccine mandates and everything, is people who would otherwise say, screw you, I'll eat grass before I bend the knee to this tyrannical regime. They're looking at their children and they're saying, I'm willing to incur whatever damage may come from getting this vaccine, so long as I know I can put food on the table for you, little Jimmy, or, Mrs. Wife or whatever. It's really a weakness in that sense. And so when we talk about the other areas of resilience and insulating yourself from potential means of leveraging you, if they cut off your food or whatever, good, you got a little garden in the backyard. You now need to factor in your family, because they are an extension of you, and they are, they could probably leverage suffering against your family more effectively than they could even against you. So it is in your best interest now to make your family resilient as well as yourself. You can hit the gym, you can have your food stocked up, you can have your bug out bag, but what are you doing for your son? What are you doing for your wife? You need to make sure that they're okay, because if, and this has even happened before. You talk about Sherman burning Atlanta. What was the point of that? What utility is it in killing civilians in the rear, like when the Allies bombed Dresden and everything? And it's like, well, this is why these people are fighting in the first place. They're fighting to protect their families and the people that they love. And if those people are being wiped out, then they're very quickly demoralized, and they're likely to abandon whatever cause they are, because there's really no cause more important to anyone than their own families. And so it's a strength in the sense that you will do anything for them, and it's a weakness in the sense that you will do anything for them. And so all of your attention and your energy that goes into making a safe, ensuring the existence of your children and a future for them, that can be used against you. So I would just keep that in mind. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a family. You should. You just need to factor that into whatever preparations that you're making.
Right. You have to be a team, a unit, with your spouse, and you have to be committed to the journey of bringing your kids along sort of with you. And in that way, that weakness then becomes a strength.
Yeah, you can't just leave them in the rear and forget about them. And that's what a lot of activists do, is they'll go out on the streets and then they'll get arrested or something like that. And it's like, that's cool, man. You showed up for the fight, but now you're in prison and your family's hungry. And it also sends a message to everyone around you where it's like, oh, this guy got taken out of the fight through legal or kinetic means, whatever. And now his family is struggling, and every single other family is looking at that saying, well, we don't want to end up like them, and every guy is looking at that. I don't want my kids to end up, without a father like that. And so there's steps that you could take to insulate them from the sufferings in your absence, and also insulate them really from any means of leverage that could be wielded against them. And you should do that. You should do that because you love
them. Miss Cherie, any thoughts to add to family? We'd like to hear your thoughts.
Back to what you were saying, if you don't have kids, you're the first person in your family, not to do so over, the millennial that the people you've come from. And it just makes me want to smack one of my cousins upside the head, because after him, no more, family line, at least, surname wise, and just very annoyed with him on that.
Someone's breathing on the mic. I don't know who's on it, but
that's probably me.
Oh, okay. Sorry, it sounds like you're swallowing it. So but I mean, if you're, some people they've judged themselves not to have a lot of these other factors. They're not self-sufficient. They don't have fidelity. They don't have fitness. They don't see a future. Maybe your cousin is in this boat, and if you're that kind of person, maybe you don't have the strength to build a family. But then you're just sort of one of the masses that's in the middle, and you're not one of the knights of the Reconquista, right?
Yeah. So, that being said, there's a lot of utility in not having a family. You're definitely a more useful person, and that's the case in the military and outside of the military. Every commander's ideal, troop is a single fit young man, and
really,
those are obviously in limited supply.
Are they verbal about that?
No, because you can't, harass people for having a family. But any duty that exists in the military, anytime you go, to the field or something, as any commander, you have to consider the family needs of your troops because of this exact element. Even when you get deployed, there's a huge pipeline of family preparations that occur for military members that get deployed, because if stuff starts happening in the rear, their wife leaves them, or the wife starts emptying their bank account, or they're financially struggling, literally anything that causes hardship to that individual's family, just completely obliterates their ability to be effective on the battlefield in whatever forward deployed environment that they're in. And so, as a from a military commander's perspective, you have a direct vested interest in the really the resilience period of the family itself, and you really can't ignore that element. But it's very convenient when you have a bunch of single individuals who make up your unit, because you don't have to worry about that. All you have to worry about is the individual that's standing right in front of you and how they're doing, and you can have a much closer pulse on that, a much greater means of influencing that. And usually those people, they're mentally present. They're not thinking, they're not trying to avoid death or anything, to try to, they have no other considerations other than what's happening in the here and now. And so it's way more useful from a military commander to basically have people who don't have families.
Well, this conversation here, this slide in particular, brought into focus some thoughts that I had, particularly around the Catholic Church not allowing priests to have families. In the Protestant traditions, almost all church leaders are allowed to have kids. In the Orthodox tradition, some of the church leaders are allowed to have kids, but in the Catholic tradition, they're not allowed to have it. And it's always like, well, how can somebody minister to families if they don't have families themselves? And if you look at it this way, that these are, warriors, that priests are captains of the religious faith. And, of course, the Catholic theology is that the church is their family, and the Holy Trinity is their family. But if you look at it from a practical perspective, their focus, just like the army guy, is on the mission solely, not on the mission at home and the mission on deployment, because their mission is just, that's all they have is their holy mission, not distracted with family concerns. So that's really interesting, and I think that the Catholic Church knows that, and that's why they're not going to be budging anytime soon, even though there is pressure in various quarters for priests to be allowed to have families. But I think that it's something that's interesting and unique, and it sort of qualifies them as actual warriors of the faith, even though you don't see them out with swords on the battlefield all that often anymore.
Yeah. You should have a family. That being said, there's nothing kinetic happening in the U.S. right now. There's no reason why people can't be preparing to have a family. If you don't have a family, you should be preparing to have a family. That's what you should be doing. Not preparing for a fight that you get to go die in or something, and you get to enjoy every second of it because you're not leaving behind anyone. You should simultaneously have it. The greatest virtue, or I guess pursuit, that you can have as a man is having a family and fighting for them. If you could do both, great. But if you have to choose one, and you just end up fighting, or you just end up having a family, fine. But ideally, you are pursuing both, and you have the strength. You have the strength and the fitness, financial and every other way, to pursue both simultaneously if need be.
Here's another way to look at it. It's much more important for you to have your own kids, say 2 or 3 kids, than it is to kill 2 or 3 enemies on the battlefield. Any enemy that you would have in a war, whether it's a culture war or a kinetic war or a cold war, is going to be replaceable. Anyone, all the way up to the top, is going to be ultimately replaceable. But the kids that you raise yourself, that are extensions of you into time, genetically, are completely irreplaceable. And what you teach them and how you raise them and how you train them is irreplaceable for the fabric of the culture. Whereas removing 1 or 2 cockroaches from the other side is vanishingly small, of vanishingly small importance compared to you bringing in the same number of people into the world. Mm-hmm. I think so. With that, shall we move on? To finance?
Yeah, and I think this is probably one of the most important pieces making a resilient family is the financial aspect.
I agree. And this all sort of builds on itself, kind of backwards. If you guys haven't noticed, we're both Templar and Commander culture here are very organizational thinkers. And I was realizing this when we were talking about this stream. I was like, we both think the exact same way, and we both like to organize and categorize things the same way. So you'll have to forgive us, and this is why we bring in Miss Cherie for her moments of feminine clarity. But the most important thing here, and I'll let you cut in at any point, Templar, is that you want to back slowly away from the dollar with your hands kind of up in front of your face and or in front of your chest, backing out the door a little bit slowly, turning around the hall, and then divest yourself of it. There's a lot of ways to do that, and we've spent a lot of airtime talking about how to do that. But you're going to want to move into the decentralized finance sphere, whether you're just hodling or just buying Bitcoin and stuffing it into a wallet, or whether you're actively wrapping and trading and staking coins. You're going to want to move into commodities, whether that's a community garden, a rooftop garden, or that it's something like beans, bullets, and band-aids. Those are the three B's I've got down there. Food, ways to get water, medicine,
Gold.
ways to protect yourself, gold. There's always a fourth B, bullion, right? And then skills. Specifically skills that you can use to barter for goods and resources, right? So if you're the only blacksmith in town, who are they going to come to when they need to shoe a horse, right? Or when they need, or if you're the only machinist in town, who are they going to come to when their press or lathe or something breaks down? Or if you're the only person who knows how to tan leather, or you're the only person that has a 3D printer, or if you're the only person who, an innumerable number of things, small skills like just buying like a wood chopper, those wood choppers that you just press real easy. If you're the only one in town that has that, you have a skill that nobody else has, all the way down to like, somebody who can tie flies. Hey, that's a hobby. Yeah, it's also a very useful skill in trout country when the grid goes down. So any of those things, as long as you're building up your stash of DeFi commodities and skills and divesting yourself out of the dollar. Do we want to talk? How you're the financial guru? Yeah.
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head. That first piece there, no dollar. Everything that comes after that is just ways of surviving without the dollar. The whole point of DeFi is you're using crypto instead of a dollar. Commodities, you're holding things that have inherent value instead of dollars. And then skills, it's theoretically a service. You can buy goods or services with money if you just have the service in your back pocket, or a guy who does. You have access now to, instead of paying for a service, you can either do it yourself or barter with someone that can do it. So all of these things, to summarize the financial aspect, remember the whole point of this is you're making yourself resilient. You are insulating yourself from dependency on the people and the things that hate you. And what do they use? How do they participate in these mediums of exchange? They use the dollar. So what should your priority be? It should be getting away from the dollar. And that doesn't mean you sell everything right now and you just buy hard assets. It's really another thought exercise where it's like, okay, I am currently dependent on the dollar because this is what I use to get everything that I have. If they shut my money off right now, say your job, you have no job because you're not allowed to work because you're not vaccinated. What do you have at your disposal? Okay, you have the DeFi and you're collecting the interest, so you're still getting some income in some capacity. You have your garden in your backyard, so you don't need to buy food anymore. And what your goal then at that point is you drive expenses down. Maybe you have solar panels and you're holding solar panels and you're running a computer, so you're not paying electricity, and you're using that computer for crypto mining so that your solar panels aren't just sitting there, but they're actually making you money. And then when the grid goes down, it's like, okay, well, I don't need this computer to be crypto mining for me anymore. I can now use these solar panels to keep my deep freezer running so that I have food 3 months from now. And it's, again, these are things that you put thought into beforehand, so that in the event some malevolent actor wants to shut off your access to money, and by extension your access to everything that you need to survive for you and your family, which would be a very compelling thing if someone wants to get you to do something and they deprive you and your family of food and water and shelter, you're probably going to do what they want you to do. So you move away from that. Now, okay, so the thought exercise is they shut your job off. How are you going to get those things? You could even go as far as to say, you're not vaccinated, you can't keep your money in a bank now, or you can't get health insurance. How do you acquire these needs? How do you store your money? How do you keep your value stored up when you don't have access to these institutional entities that could be leveraged against you? Any dependency that you have is a vulnerability that can be exploited. And so this financial element, because of the world that we live in, before it wasn't as compelling. 100 years ago, maybe not as compelling. People using cash, but people still very strong communities, relying on a lot of things other than cash still. Nowadays, it's really and it's useful. It's not a mistake that this happened. It's very convenient to do things like swipe a credit card and then collect your produce. That is a very simple transaction. It's very easy, and it's improved the quality of life for so many people. It's a very efficient way of running an economy. At the end of the day, it causes dependencies because it's hyper specialized. And so, again, what you're doing is you're doing a thought exercise. What would happen if I had to step away from the dollar entirely? Would I still be able to provide for myself and my family? And because of the importance of the dollar and all of these sort of electronic financial, it's not an institution, it's a service. Their credit card processing is a financial service that is offered electronically, and we really don't stop and think about how important these things are in our daily life. Or something like your iPhone, or bank app on your phone. Any entity, Apple could cut you off from your ability to access your finances. The bank itself could cut you off from your ability to access your finances. Shutting off your electricity will in turn cause your phone to die, which will cut you off from your access to your finances. There's so many different ways that any entity or nature itself could interfere with your ability to provide for your family. And maybe you can't be prepared for everything, but if you have a solar panel, the sun's never going to go out, and if it does, your concern is not electricity. And if you have food stored up in your basement, with the exception of someone physically coming to your door and taking it from you, it's still going to be there. And it's amazing what 3 months would do for a family when the normal family only has 5 days worth of food. It was, I believe, Texas that had that big freak snowstorm that shut the electricity off for a month. And for some people, that's the difference between life and death. And so 3 months of food, that's the difference between you just completely chilling and having no worries whatsoever, or potentially dying. And that's 3 months. That's $1,000. And so it's like, come on, like it's a very compelling reason to want to actually take action here. And I think everybody knows in the back of your head, kind of like fitness. Everyone knows in the back of your head, yeah, I should go for a run or whatever. But in all honesty, like you cannot afford to start taking these steps when you have to. Fitness doesn't happen overnight. These financial insulation steps don't happen overnight. It will take time for you to order some gold and start stocking up. It'll take you some time to do some research, to buy some crypto and everything, or start a mining rig. It'll take you some time to start growing a garden so that you don't have to buy food. All of these things are little pieces of a puzzle that will eventually lead to this inflection point of your expenses being below your income, even when you don't have a job. And you could just keep wargaming scenarios against yourself. Say they cut off my job and the electricity goes down. Can I still provide for myself? And you do your own risk assessment there. How likely do you think how insulated do you think you need to be? But if you don't have anything going for you and you are solely dependent on the grocery store down the street, or you're solely reliant on there being food in the fridge every time you open it, I would highly recommend taking a more robust approach to being able to provide for your needs and the needs of your family. And that all boils down to finance, because money is the thing that we use to acquire all these goods.
Mm-hmm. And I will add very little to that, because that was great. That it's never been a better time to prep food-wise, to stock your larder, because every single food item that you can buy today in your grocery store is either going to be more expensive a month from now, or it's not going to be available a month from now because of various supply chain shortages. And so why not take this opportunity to go down and, stock up? You're still going to eat the food. You would still buy it, whether you buy it today for less money or a month from now for more money. So if you have the means, put some of that divest some of that dollar into canned chili, or, whatever it is that you need or plan on eating, and let that be a start then. Because the key, I would say, is to get away as much as you can from the dollar, a toppling system. We all have day-to-day jobs, and this is the system that we live in. But understand that it's a poison. It's a millstone that a bunch of psychopaths have tied around our necks and are gleefully sort of heave-hoing as we speak, and we don't know at what point they're going to chuck it in the water. And so, the further away that you are from the U.S. dollar system, and that includes, British pounds or euros or whatever, the safer that you are going to be, the more mobile that you'll be able to be to find your footing in whatever kind of new system is going to come next. And that's really all I have to say on that. Ms. Cherie?
Just want to point out that wood-burning stoves and fireplaces are your friend.
They very much are, especially if you live in cold climates, which is where everyone should live, because there's nothing worse than sweating. But if you, I basically anything that you can let nature do for yourself. I like the idea of solar panels. I like the idea of wood burning stoves, because it's like, hey, nature built all this energy. God literally created this energy and delivered it to you from on high like manna. And you're still sitting there, saying, how come, woe is me? No. Shall we move to the last slide of this segment?
Yep, and I think it's all been building to this. These are all preparations for what?
For the future. The key phrase that I always think about. Somebody said it. Somebody far smarter than me, and I wish I could remember who they were. Said that the greatest wisdom is planting trees in the shade of which you will never sit. And that is what we are doing here in building a new West, right? Many of the trees, our virgin forests, have been cut down, slashed, destroyed, burned by the invading hordes that have destroyed our, pastoral little idyll here. But what we can do is we can start looking forward to the future. And it's easy to look forward a year into the future, and it's harder to look 10 years. But you have to have, at its furthest length, 1,000-year plan. What are the efforts that you do today going to lend to the people who live 1,000 years from now? Are you going to make their life better? If you are, then you're on the right track. 100 years from now, 50 years from now, this is generational. Year 1 is your generation. Year 10 is your kids' generation. Year 50 is your grandkids and great grandkids. And year 100, you're not there for. But you are, every single one of those eras, you are responsible for.
Yeah, if I were to summarize these, the 1-year plan being things that you could readily plan for and affect change with, your 10-year plan is kind of like your ideal. Where do you want to go? What does your career look like? And your 50-year plan is really more of like a retirement plan. What do you want to accomplish in your lifetime? And essentially, what would you be comfortable? At what point would you be comfortable dying? If you do all these things, at that point, you're good, and you can live out the rest of your life without really having to accomplish anything more, because there's only so much you could do in your old age. So, what are you going to be? What are you pursuing? 50 years. What does your retirement look like? 100 years, really your children's future, and then 1,000 years, your people's future. Because you're not really going to be around for your children's future, and you're definitely not going to be around 1,000 years from now for your people's future, but you still play a role, and your efforts will still impact their lives and their outcomes. So you should be thinking about this thing, because I can guarantee you there was someone 1,000 years ago who was thinking about your very existence today, and not just wondering what life would be like 1,000 years from now, but actually doing steps to positively affect change 1,000 years from now. The people who started the Reconquista, the Crusaders, those people were fighting for you. They were fighting for you, whatever your name is, listening to this stream right now. Those people were fighting for you, and you don't know them and they don't know you, but you are better off as a result of their efforts, and you owe them your effort as well, and you owe the people 1,000 years from now your effort. And this is the kind of mindset that we have to have, that is completely obliterated by our individualistic and atomized society today. You are tied to your people, and you better start taking steps, because the people before you did, and you owe it to those who come after you, to start taking steps to really better yourself and better them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If you ever have a chance to go into an old growth forest, or to see one of these old trees, just wonder, like, who not only who planted this, because maybe nobody did, but the thing that I always think about is how many, woodsmen walked past this thing and said, you know what? I'm not going to cut that down. I'm going to leave that there. There's something beautiful there. And it was generations, hundreds of guys who probably could have fed their family for a year on that tree, or made $1 million or something like that. And they said, you know what? I'm going to leave that there. And that's what we need to do. We need to plant, we need to cultivate, and we need to respect that which has come before us, so that if I go forward 1,000 years, I will say, this is a better world. This is the world that I wanted to create. This is a world that I can be proud that my descendants are living in.
There's utility too in having that 1 and 10 and even 50-year plan, because when you have a goal and you can envision it, it's a lot more motivating to pursue that thing. So not just what do you want to be doing, but where do you want to be doing it. A lot of people probably see themselves maybe on some kind of homestead somewhere. It's like, okay, that's great. You should have realistic steps that you need to take in order to get there. And oftentimes it might be time-based, but it also might be conditions-based, where you say, I've done the math, I've done the research, I know I need this much money in order to buy this plot of land, in order to get this gear, in order to be self-sufficient and everything. And you could do that over time. But if you do some of these calculations, you put some thought into it, you could start getting a roadmap of, okay, I only need to work this job this much longer, and then I'll have this much money, which will allow me to buy this piece of land and begin this next stage of my life. And
the dollar divested stage.
Yeah. And so there's a lot more utility in actually having that plan, because you go, oh, this is a real goal that I'm actually moving towards. And then opportunities might present themselves for you to accelerate your timeline there, especially if it's conditions based. If you have an explicit dollar amount, and maybe you just get lucky in the stock market, or maybe you get a better job, it's like, oh, good, I can push even harder towards this goal and make this thing a reality. And there's some, it's sad sometimes when you commit to a job, or you commit to a plan for your future, because anything that you commit to, there's an opportunity cost. You're sacrificing all of the other options that you theoretically could be doing. And so you're like, is this piece of land that I want to buy, is it perfect? Probably not. There's a good chance that whatever house or whatever job you're working or whatever land you're buying isn't perfect. And you're always going to compare to perfection. Oh, if only it had a spring, or if it only had, more trees or something like that. It's definitely better to have a goal and to move forward with that goal and commit to that goal, because you will definitely be better off than if you just do nothing or you wait for perfection to come to you. It might not be perfect, but there's definitely something to be said about moving forward with a plan that you set for yourself, that 1 year, 10-year, 50-year plan, and really just push for that. Because I can almost promise you, if you don't have those goals, and if you don't try to pursue a tangible goal, you're probably not going to end up with anything. Nonetheless, maybe a slightly less than perfect piece of land or slightly less than perfect retirement home.
Well, the arch liberal economist John Maynard Keynes was
Hate that guy.
reported. I figured you would. Is reported to have said, when somebody asked him about his his monetary schemes, they said, "But in the long run, I don't see how any of this could work out. It's all going to end in disaster mathematically." And very smugly he responded back to them, "Well, in the long run, we're all dead." And that was the extent of his future planning. And then an entire globe decided to take his prescriptions in hand and create an economic system out of them, a system in which, in the long run, we're all dead. Well, we here at the Commander Culture channel, we do not think that in the long run we're all dead. In the long run, we live forever. And not just talking spiritually, but we're talking our culture lives on. Our heroes live on. The foundations that we build and the trees that we plant and the architecture and world that we create lives on. And so we're not dead. We take the exact opposite route of him, and because of that, we will outlast him. Because we'll outlast all of the minions of Keynes and people who think like him, because we have 1,000-year plan, and I'd even put a 10,000-year plan. Heck, year 1,000s. By the way, we're going to the stars, right? That's how I end all of these broadcasts, because that is the goal. That's the necessity to get off of this small rock and branch out. I was just reading a study earlier today that the human brain, in order to grow, actually requires movement and exploration of your surroundings. It was written, it was posted in the context of lockdowns, and the effect that it might have on growing adolescent brains. But I was reflecting, like, we need to grow out. We need to go into other places and other people. I will say the people in charge of the country, in charge of the world, are not thinking like this. Boris Johnson in England, is all he can think about is how he can lie a little bit better to keep his job for an extra week or two. He's not thinking about how to move Britons onto the moon. The senile, putrescent, sad excuse for an executive that the United States currently has can't even decide which pudding he wants, let alone where he wants the people of America to be in 10 or 50 or 100 years, right? And so that's up to us. That's up to us to own the future. That's up to us to define the future, because we're the ones who are actually going to show up for it. So sorry, we got a bunch of bots in the chat, and I am spamming them out. So that's what I have to say. Miss Cherie, we would love to hear your thoughts about the future, because without women, there is no future for men in year one or year 1,000.
That is true, and I was just thinking on what you were saying. It's hard to believe that we can't go to the stars when Western countries are bringing in all these doctors and engineers and astronauts.
And cello players.
Yes.
Yeah, those are the people that we're importing, the best and the brightest. Because it's all short-term thinking, right? It's all profit motive. If you have a factory worker who's making a living wage, and you can outsource that job to the third world, or you can import a third worlder under the table or above the table to take that person's job and work for less. You've just improved your bottom line as a corporation, without realizing or without caring that you've impoverished the cultural and economic foundation upon which your entire enterprise and edifice runs in the first place. So you're having problems that way. Continue, Mystery.
Oh, that was about it. And I was going to say cheers to Mr. Brown, and he should probably be a mod to keep the bots away.
Well, we've never had problems with bots until now. I'm glad.
You're
I'm like, wow,
popular.
I'm so popular. I'm getting bots now. I feel kind of honored. So, we'll have conversations with Mr. Brown. If, by the way, listeners, if you ever want to catch Mr. Brown, he streams frequently with many interesting guests. Sometimes I'm lucky enough to be on there, but he's somebody you should definitely check out, and he's a dear friend of the channel. So, I think we are up against our 2-hour mark. Templar, did we want to jump into the other slides, or did we want to hold those for another day?
No, I think this is a good ending point for the first step in our 5, but really 7 steps for a new West. I would like to also mention that you can ignore everything John Maynard Keynes ever said about economics because he was a gay pedophile. So you can entirely discount everything he has to say. Just look at like Mises or
Hayek, somebody.
Yeah.
I was thinking, wait, was he that? No, see, I always get him confused with Arthur C. Clarke, who was who was also a pedophile. I think a gay pedophile who went to like India or somewhere. And Keynes did something, but it was like in North Africa, wasn't it? He went to like Egypt.
It was the Mediterranean. Keynes he would travel around to like child brothels and participate. So you can only expect the kind of degenerate individual produces degenerate schools of thought. It really is actually pretty funny how it's like physiology almost, where if someone looks like they're evil, or if someone is like just ugly or something, there's a good chance also that their beliefs and their way of life is reflected in their appearance. And I don't know, it's just funny seeing this heinous economic prescriptions that have caused so much harm to so many people coming from a heinous person who has caused so much harm to so many people. It's kind of besides the point, but I just felt it was worth mentioning because he is, kind of lauded on this pedestal, and the entire modern world really has based their financial policy off of his recommendations, the modern monetary policy, and it's having disastrous effects. So I don't know. I felt it was worth mentioning. Not that many people knew that.
Yeah, another reason to get rid of the dollar, right? It's or divest from the dollar system, of which most countries are a part. But you can do that now. In 2015, there really wasn't this option the same way. Certainly, or earlier in the 90s and stuff like that. So there are the worse things get, the better hopes that we have for the future.
Friedman is another good alternative. Milton Friedman's another good alternative.
Excellent one. Sheree, any parting thoughts?
Oh, no.
Okay, fair enough.
I would just recommend, just scroll back to the top there. Probably hit that summary again. This is step 1 of the 7 steps to a new West. You got resilience. That's the first thing we covered. We'll go on to community acceleration, chaos, and renaissance. And again, I said at the beginning of the stream, I'm really excited for this because it provides that roadmap. It provides some guidance to an otherwise, desperate situation, and having actionable items to work towards really does a lot for the human psyche. So all is not lost. We've got a plan. The only thing left to do is execute. So again, looking forward to producing some more of this content.
Excellent. Well, we're looking forward to having you here. We want to thank all of the people who participated in the chat and all of the people who tuned in to listen. And we also want to thank anybody that has listened this far on a rebroadcast or a re-listening. I want to thank in particular Mr. Brown for inspiring me to get these slides put in order the way that StreamYards now has. So thank you for that, sir. I salute you. For Templar and for Ms. Cherie Chrétien, this is Commander Culture. And I want to tell you that tomorrow does belong to you. We're going to the stars. Good night.